Rowan woke up with the taste of smoke in her mouth. For one terrible second she thought the fire had found her again. Heat clawed at her skin and memory, a roar in her ears that wasn't really there. She tried to scream and nothing came out, just a dry hitch in her throat. Her fingers clenched around fabric that felt too thin, too clean, and when she forced her eyes open she saw peeling white paint instead of flames. A ceiling. Low. Cracked in the corner like a spiderweb frozen mid-spread. She lay there blinking, heart galloping, breath shallow. The air smelled like boiled porridge and disinfectant. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed. Someone scolded them. Footsteps passed. Ordinary sounds. Normal. Alive. Rowan pushed herself up on her elbows. Her arms were small. Too small. The sleeves of her pajamas slipped down, revealing wrists that hadn't yet learned the weight of adulthood. She stared at them, her pulse roaring in her ears. No. No, no, no. She slid off the narrow bed and staggered to the small mirror bolted above the sink. The girl staring back at her had straight black hair hacked blunt at the shoulders, two big eyes, a bruised yellow shadow under one cheekbone. She was 9 years old. Maybe 10. Her own face from a lifetime ago. The orphanage. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the sink, breathing hard. It was real. The chill of porcelain under her palms, the ache in her calves, the way her heart refused to slow. She squeezed her eyes shut and a different ceiling flashed behind her lids. A hospital room. White again, but cleaner. Machines beeping softly. The smell of antiseptic stronger than porridge. A doctor shaking his head while someone cried. Her own chest tight, lungs failing, the long unraveling of a life that had ended too soon and too quietly. She was dead. She had died, and now she was here. A knock sounded at the door, sharp and brisk. Rowan. Up already? Ms. Adler's voice carried that brisk cheer adults used when they were tired of pretending. Good. Get dressed. Visitors today. Visitors. The word hit like a dropped plate. Rowan's grip tightened on the sink. Of course. Of all days. She remembered this day with a clarity that made her dizzy. The polished shoes by the door. The forced smiles. The way the air itself had seemed to hold its breath. Potential parents. The day everything split apart. Rowan? Ms. Adler knocked again. You hear me? I'm up, Rowan said. Her voice came out higher than she expected, thin and young. She swallowed and tried again. I'm coming. She dressed slowly, fingers clumsy with memory. Gray skirt. White blouse with a missing button. Shoes scuffed at the toes. As she braided her hair, her hands moved on instinct, neat and tight. She had learned early how to make herself small, presentable. Useful. When she stepped into the hallway, she saw Eliza. Eliza was leaning against the wall near the stairs, arms folded, one foot tapping. Her hair was looser than Rowan's, curls frizzing around her face like she didn't care who noticed. She was smiling, bright and eager, but her eyes were sharp. Too sharp for a child. Their eyes met. Rowan's breath caught. Eliza knew. She knew the shape of that look. Rowan had worn it herself for years in secret. The look of someone carrying a future that did not belong to this body. Of someone who had already been hurt and was waiting to be hurt again. Eliza's smile widened, just a little too much. She pushed off the wall and walked over, close enough that Rowan could smell the faint sweetness of soap. Lavender. Cheap and overly strong. You're up early, Eliza said. Nervous? Rowan studied her sister's face. Same parents. Same blood. But where Rowan had always been quiet, observant, Eliza burned hot and fast. In their first life, that fire had taken her places. It had also burned everything it touched. I guess, Rowan said. Eliza leaned in, her voice dropping. Today's the day, she whispered, eyes gleaming. We won't be stuck here much longer. A memory rose unbidden. Eliza crying in the orphanage bathroom years later, mascara streaked, phone crushed in her hand. Eliza screaming at Rowan in a cracked dorm hallway, accusing, desperate. Eliza lying still under a white sheet. Rowan forced the image away. Yeah, she said. Today. They went downstairs together. The common room had been scrubbed within an inch of its life. The children were lined up on the sofa and chairs, backs straight, hands folded. Ms. Adler hovered like a general before inspection. Two couples stood near the window. Rowan recognized them instantly. The first was Mrs. Harrow. She wore a cream coat that probably cost more than the orphanage's monthly budget. Her hair was pinned perfectly, not a strand out of place. She smiled politely, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Beside her stood her husband, tall and grave, hands clasped behind his back like he was inspecting a boardroom instead of a room full of children. The second couple stood closer together. Mrs. Zhao's hand rested firmly on her husband's arm, fingers digging in just enough to be possessive. Her smile was wide and practiced, her eyes calculating. Mr. Zhao nodded at everything Ms. Adler said, his mouth turned down in a permanent line of disapproval. Rowan's stomach twisted. She knew where each path led. The Harrow house had been cold, yes. Quiet. Affection rationed and awkward. But it had been safe. Predictable. A place where no one hit her for getting the answer wrong, where silence was not a weapon but a habit. She had survived there. More than that, she had grown. The Zhao house had been something else entirely. Rules that shifted without warning. Praise that came only when it served them. Punishments that lingered long after the bruises faded. Eliza had gone there with her head held high, convinced she could outsmart them. She had believed suffering was temporary if you were clever enough. It hadn't been. Ms. Adler clapped her hands. All right, children. Let's be on our best behavior. Eliza squeezed Rowan's hand suddenly, hard. Remember, she murmured. What we talked about. Rowan looked at her. What did we talk about? Eliza's eyes flicked toward Mrs. Harrow. You first, she said softly. They want someone quiet. Someone easy to manage. That's you. Rowan felt a chill creep up her spine. In their first life, Eliza had pushed her forward too. Back then Rowan hadn't known why. She had thought it was generosity. Sacrifice. Love. Now she understood. Eliza wanted to send her into the cold so she herself could chase the warmth she believed waited elsewhere. She thought she was condemning Rowan to loneliness and distance, to a life starved of affection. Eliza was wrong about many things. But her cruelty was never accidental. Mrs. Harrow's gaze settled on Rowan. It was assessing, sharp. She stepped closer, crouching slightly. What's your name? Rowan opened her mouth. For a moment, she considered lying. Running. Screaming the truth into the room. It would change nothing. Rowan, she said. Rowan Hale. Mrs. Harrow nodded. You're very composed. I like to read, Rowan added, because she remembered this too. And I'm good at math. Eliza made a small sound behind her, something like a laugh swallowed down. The Zhaos turned their attention to Eliza. Mrs. Zhao beamed. And you, sweetheart? Eliza, she said brightly. I'm very hardworking. I want to make my parents proud. Mrs. Zhao's smile sharpened. Mr. Zhao nodded once, approval flickering. Rowan watched it all like a play she had memorized long ago. Every line hit its mark. When the moment came, Eliza's hand pressed between Rowan's shoulder blades. Go on, she whispered. This is where you belong. Rowan stumbled forward a step, then another, until she stood in front of Mrs. Harrow. She felt the weight of Eliza's gaze burning into her back. Rowan could have stepped aside. She didn't. She straightened her shoulders and met Mrs. Harrow's eyes. She thought of nights spent studying under a desk lamp. Of a boy named Theo who barely spoke, whose silence had mirrored her own until they learned how to exist in the same room. Of a life that, while imperfect, had been hers. I'd like to go with you, Rowan said quietly. Mrs. Harrow's lips curved, just slightly. Very well. Behind her, Eliza sucked in a sharp breath. The paperwork moved quickly. Ms. Adler cried, as she always did. Promises were made. Hugs were exchanged. As Mrs. Harrow took Rowan's hand. Eliza leaned close, her voice trembling with something that might have been excitement. Or rage. You think you're winning, she whispered. Enjoy it while you can. I'll make sure you regret this. Rowan turned to her sister. For the first time, she saw the cracks. The fear Eliza refused to acknowledge. The guilt buried so deep it had poisoned everything above it. I hope you get what you want, Rowan said. Eliza's smile faltered. As Rowan walked toward the door, the winter light spilling in like a promise, Eliza's voice followed her, low and vicious. This isn't over, she said. I'll take everything back. Rowan didn't look back. She stepped outside, the cold biting at her cheeks, and let the door close behind her. The Harrow estate did not feel like a home when Rowan first stepped inside it. It felt like a museum. The front doors closed behind her with a soft, decisive thud, the sound swallowed by thick carpeting. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something colder underneath, like stone that never quite warmed. Rowan stood just inside the entryway, her small suitcase at her feet, her gloved hands clasped together so tightly her fingers ached. Mrs. Harrow removed her coat and handed it to a waiting housekeeper without a word. Mr. Harrow had already disappeared down a side corridor, his footsteps measured, unhurried. No one looked back to see if Rowan was following. She did. She always did. The house unfolded around her in clean lines and quiet corners. Tall windows draped in heavy fabric. Walls hung with restrained art that seemed chosen to impress rather than comfort. There were no family photographs in sight. No signs of children, past or present. You'll be staying in the East Wing, Mrs. Harrow said as they climbed the stairs. Her heels made no sound on the runner. Dinner is at 7. Breakfast at 7:30. The staff will explain the rest. Yes, ma'am, Rowan said automatically, then flushed. She bit her tongue. She remembered this too. The way politeness became distance if you weren't careful. Mrs. Harrow paused at the top of the stairs and looked at her. Not unkindly. Not warmly either. You may call me Margaret, she said. And my husband is Victor. Rowan nodded. Yes. Margaret. It felt wrong in her mouth, like wearing someone else's coat. But she would learn. She always did. The room they led her to was larger than the entire dormitory she had shared at the orphanage. A wide bed with crisp white sheets. A desk positioned to catch the afternoon light. Shelves already stocked with books chosen by someone who had skimmed a list titled age-appropriate literature. Rowan set her suitcase down and stood very still. This was where she had slept for 10 years. This was where she had learned how to live quietly, how to succeed without praise, how to turn loneliness into something productive. This will do, Margaret said. If you need anything, ask Mrs. Klein. She turned to leave, then hesitated. There is one more thing, she added. You have an older brother. Rowan's heart gave a small, treacherous jump. I know, she said. Margaret studied her. You do? Rowan corrected herself quickly. I mean, you mentioned him. Before. Margaret nodded, apparently satisfied. Theo is different. He requires patience. I expect you to be considerate. I will, Rowan said. Margaret's gaze lingered on her a moment longer, as if searching for something. Then she left, the door closing softly behind her. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Theo. In her first life, he had been a ghost when she arrived. A tall, silent presence who moved through the house like a shadow, speaking rarely, eyes dull with a kind of emptiness that had frightened her at first. He had been 17 then. She had been 9. She remembered the first time he had looked at her. Really looked. It had been months in. She'd been doing homework at the dining table when he'd paused, frowned slightly, and asked, "Do you always hum when you're thinking?" She had stopped mid-note, mortified. "I'm sorry," she'd said. He'd shaken his head. "Don't be." That had been the beginning. Slow. Uneven. Fragile. A knock sounded at her door. Rowan stood quickly. Yes? The door opened just enough for a face to appear. Theo's face. He was older now, of course. Or younger, depending on how you looked at it. 15 this time. His hair fell into his eyes, dark and unkempt. His expression was blank in that familiar way, like someone had turned the volume down on his emotions and forgotten how to turn it back up. "You're in my spot," he said. Rowan blinked. "I'm sorry?" "This room," he clarified. "I used to come here. When it was empty." She swallowed. "I can move." He shrugged. "It's fine." Silence stretched between them, thick and awkward. Rowan felt the weight of all the things she knew about him pressing against her ribs. The diagnosis they never spoke aloud. The therapists who came and went. The way Victor avoided talking about his son as if silence might fix him. "I'm Rowan," she said finally. "I know." Of course he did. He knew everything. Observed everything. Just rarely commented. "I'm your sister," she added, then winced internally. Too much. Too fast. Theo tilted his head, considering. "I know." Another pause. "You hum," he said. "Still." Rowan's cheeks warmed. "I try not to." "Don't," he said again, more firmly this time. "It's grounding." Something in his voice shifted. Just a fraction. She felt it like a crack in ice. "Okay," she said softly. Theo nodded once and turned away, disappearing down the hall as quietly as he'd come. Rowan sat back down, her heart thudding. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. This time, she would do better. News traveled fast. By the time Rowan started school, whispers followed her through the halls. The Harrows had adopted again. A girl this time. Quiet. Smart. Pretty in an unassuming way. She kept her head down and her grades high. Teachers liked her. Students mostly ignored her. It was perfect. Theo walked her to school on the first day. He didn't speak, just adjusted his stride to match hers. When a group of older boys laughed too loudly as they passed, Theo shifted subtly closer, his shoulder brushing Rowan's. She pretended not to notice. But her chest tightened all the same. At lunch, she ate alone, reading a book she had already read twice before. She liked the predictability of it. The way the words stayed the same even when everything else had changed. She did not think about Eliza. Until she heard her name. "Rowan Hale?" She looked up. Eliza stood at the edge of the cafeteria, her uniform wrinkled, her hair pulled back too tightly. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been compressed by invisible hands. "You," Eliza said, her voice sharp. Too loud. Heads turned. Rowan closed her book slowly. "Eliza." A murmur rippled through the room. Eliza laughed, a brittle sound. "Don't play dumb. You remember. You remember everything, don't you?" Rowan's stomach dropped. Eliza stepped closer, leaning across the table. Her eyes were wild, darting. "You pushed me. You knew. You knew what they were like." "I didn't push you," Rowan said quietly. "You let me," Eliza hissed. "You let me go with them." Rowan stood, her chair scraping loudly. She kept her voice low, even. "This isn't the place." Eliza's smile twisted. "Oh, I think it is." She leaned in, close enough that Rowan could smell sweat and cheap perfume. "You think you won," she whispered. "But I remember too. And I'm not going to let you pretend you're innocent." Rowan met her gaze. For a moment, she considered telling her everything. About the fire. About the doll. About the truth Eliza had buried so deep she'd convinced herself of her own lies. It wouldn't help. "I hope you're safe," Rowan said instead. Eliza recoiled as if struck. "You don't get to say that," she snapped. "You don't get to act like the good one." A hand closed gently around Rowan's shoulder. "Theo." He stood behind her, tall and silent, his presence a wall. He didn't glare. Didn't threaten. He just existed, solid and unmovable. Eliza looked at him, then back at Rowan. Something like fear flickered across her face. "This isn't over," she said again, her voice shaking. "You stole my life." She turned and fled, the cafeteria buzzing in her wake. Rowan sank back into her chair, hands trembling. Theo's grip tightened briefly, then released. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her throat burned. Yes. He studied her for a moment. She's wrong. Rowan looked up at him, surprised. She chose, he added. People always do. Rowan swallowed hard. At home that night, she did her homework at the dining table, humming softly under her breath. Theo sat across from her, reading. Margaret passed by once, paused, then continued on without comment. The house was still quiet. Still distant. But it was not empty. And somewhere, far away, another house was teaching Eliza how to break. Time did not heal the Harrow house. It softened it. The years slipped by in measured, predictable rhythms. School terms and holidays. Dinners served at 7 sharp. Conversations that rarely strayed beyond academics, current events, and logistics. Affection came in indirect forms. A new desk lamp placed quietly in Rowan's room when her eyesight worsened. A violin case waiting on her bed after she expressed passing curiosity. Margaret remembering, without comment, that Rowan disliked mushrooms. It was not warmth, exactly. But it was care. Rowan learned to recognize it. By 13, she had grown into her limbs, all elbows and intent. She moved through the house with a confidence she hadn't possessed before, her footsteps no longer hesitant. She spent long hours in the library, losing herself in physics books that were far beyond her grade level, scribbling notes in the margins, chasing questions that felt like puzzles only she could see. Theo noticed everything. He noticed how she tapped her pencil when she was stuck. How she hummed when she was thinking hard. How she frowned when something didn't make sense, as if the universe had personally offended her. He noticed, and slowly, he responded. It started small. A chair pulled out for her at the table without a word. A coat draped over her shoulders when she fell asleep on the couch, a textbook open on her chest. The way he lingered nearby when she studied late, pretending to read while really keeping watch. Theo was 17 when he spoke to her first about his condition. They were in the garden, the one place in the estate that felt alive. Rowan was lying on the grass, watching clouds drift past, naming them after physical phenomena she'd recently learned about. Theo sat on the stone bench nearby, hands folded, gaze unfocused. I don't feel things, he said abruptly. Rowan rolled onto her side. You do. He shook his head. Not the way people mean it. I know what I'm supposed to feel. I just don't. She considered this, then asked, Does it bother you? Yes, he said, surprising them both with the immediacy of the answer. I think. Rowan smiled faintly. That sounds like feeling to me. He huffed a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. From then on, he spoke more. Not much, but enough. He asked her about her studies. She asked him about his therapy sessions. They existed in parallel, slowly drifting closer until the space between them felt natural rather than forced. Margaret watched this from a distance. One evening, as Rowan cleared the table, Margaret spoke. Theo has improved. Rowan paused. I'm glad. Margaret studied her carefully. I think you are good for him. Rowan didn't know what to say to that. So she said, he's good for me too. Margaret nodded once, as if filing the information away. Victor remained largely absent. He traveled often. When he was home, he spoke to Rowan politely, formally. But on her 15th birthday, he handed her a small box. Inside was a fountain pen, heavy and elegant. For your future, he said. Rowan held it like a promise. Eliza's letters arrived sporadically. At first, they were neat, enthusiastic. She wrote about her grades, her ambitions, her plans to attend a top university. She asked pointed questions about Rowan's life, about the Harrows, about money. Rowan answered carefully. Kindly. She never lied, but she never volunteered too much either. Over time, the letters changed. The handwriting grew erratic. The tone sharpened. Eliza complained about strict rules, impossible standards, punishments she framed as misunderstandings. She insisted she was fine. That she was thriving. Rowan read between the lines. When she suggested, gently, that Eliza speak to a counselor, the reply was vicious. You think you're better than me now. You think you can look down on me from your rich little house. After that, the letter stopped. Rowan dreamed of fire that night. Of smoke curling under doors. Of a doll melting, plastic dripping like tears. She woke up shaking and didn't go back to sleep. By the time they reached high school, the gap between the sisters was visible. Rowan excelled. She joined academic competitions, won scholarships, earned the quiet respect of teachers who recognized brilliance when they saw it. She learned how to speak in public without trembling, how to debate without losing her temper, how to accept praise without flinching. Theo attended her competitions when he could. He sat in the back, expression unreadable, but his presence steadied her. When she placed first at a regional science fair, he handed her a bottle of water afterward. "You did well," he said. She smiled at him, bright and unguarded. "I know." Eliza, meanwhile, appeared only in glimpses. Rowan saw her once, across a crowded train platform. Eliza looked thinner. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes darting. She wore a uniform too small for her, the hem frayed. Their eyes met. Eliza's face twisted with something like hope, then hardened into resentment. She turned away before Rowan could call out. That night, Rowan sat at her desk, staring at a physics problem she couldn't solve. The numbers blurred. She thought of Eliza studying late into the night under a flickering bulb, driven by the same fierce determination that had once made Rowan admire her. She thought of the cost of that determination, the way it demanded sacrifice after sacrifice until there was nothing left. Rowan solved the problem eventually. The answer clicked into place, elegant and undeniable. She closed her notebook and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Survival, she had learned, was not the same as living. The summer before college entrance exams arrived with heavy heat and heavier expectations. Rowan studied with a focus that bordered on obsession. Theo brought her meals when she forgot to eat. Margaret ensured the house stayed quiet. Victor arranged tutors without comment. They were, in their own way, a team. One evening, as Rowan took a break in the garden, Theo sat beside her. "You're afraid," he said. She didn't deny it. "I'm afraid of failing." He shook his head. "No. You're afraid of succeeding." She looked at him, startled. "If you succeed," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "everything becomes real. Permanent." Rowan exhaled slowly. "Yes." Theo met her gaze. His eyes were steady. "Present. Whatever happens," he said, "you're not alone." The words settled deep in her chest, warm and anchoring. In another part of the city, Eliza sat hunched over a desk, knuckles raw, eyes burning, clinging to the same exams as her only escape. Both sisters were moving forward. But the distance between them was no longer measured in miles or money. It was measured in scars. The week of the college entrance exams arrived wrapped in tension so thick Rowan could almost taste it. The Harrow house adjusted itself around her without a word. Margaret postponed social obligations. Victor cancelled a trip. The staff moved more quietly than usual, doors closing softly, footsteps careful. Theo stationed himself like a silent sentry, appearing with tea when Rowan's hands began to shake, reminding her to sleep when she lost track of time. She studied until the symbols swam behind her eyes. Physics formulas sprawled across her notebooks, elegant and merciless. She loved them for their certainty. For the way the universe, at its core, obeyed rules. Forces balanced. Energy conserved. Nothing truly came from nothing. Human beings, she had learned, were far messier. The morning of the first exam, Rowan woke before her alarm. She lay still, staring at the ceiling as pale light crept into her room. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. She pressed her palm flat against her sternum and counted slowly until the feeling eased. Downstairs, Theo was already dressed, leaning against the kitchen counter with a mug cradled in his hands. "You don't have to come," Rowan said, tying her shoes. "I know," he replied. "I want to." The drive to the testing center passed in mere silence. The city looked muted, as if someone had turned the saturation down. Students clustered near the gates, faces taut with nerves, clutching clear pencil cases and admission slips like talismans. As Rowan stepped out of the car, Theo caught her wrist gently. "You've done everything you can," he said. "The rest isn't yours to carry." She nodded, throat tight. "Wait for me?" He gave a small nod. "Always." The exams blurred together in a haze of concentration and adrenaline. Rowan emerged hours later exhausted but steady, her mind already replaying questions, double-checking answers she could no longer change. Theo handed her a bottle of water. How was it? I think, she said slowly, I think I did well. His mouth curved, just barely. Good. They were walking toward the parking lot when Rowan felt it. That prickling sensation between her shoulder blades. The awareness of being watched. She stopped. Theo followed her gaze. Eliza stood near the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a row of vending machines. She looked like a shadow of herself. Her hair was pulled back severely, strands escaping around her temples. Her uniform hung loose on her frame. There was a rawness to her, like a wound left open too long. For a moment, neither sister moved. Then Eliza stepped forward. So this is it, she said, her voice hoarse. You get the family escort too. Rowan's stomach sank. Eliza. This isn't you don't get to decide what it is, Eliza snapped. Her gaze flicked to Theo, sharp and assessing. You brought backup. Figures. Theo didn't react, but Rowan felt him shift closer. Let's talk somewhere else, Rowan said quietly. Eliza laughed, the sound jagged. Ashamed? Afraid people will hear the truth? What truth? Rowan asked. Eliza's eyes burned. That you're a liar. That you stole everything from me. Student slowed, curious. Rowan felt heat crawl up her neck. Eliza, she said, more firmly now. Stop. Eliza surged forward, her hand lifting. It happened fast. Theo stepped between them without hesitation. Eliza's hand struck his chest instead of Rowan's shoulder, the impact sharp and hollow. She recoiled, staring at him as if she hadn't expected resistance. Get out of my way, she shouted. Theo looked down at her, expression unreadable. No. Something in Eliza snapped. You think you're her hero? She screamed. You think you can protect her from what she's done? Rowan's head pounded. I haven't done anything to you. Eliza's laughter turned hysterical. You killed them. The world tilted. Theo stiffened. What did you say? You heard me, Eliza spat. Our parents. Dead because of her. And she just gets to live happily ever after? A ringing filled Rowan's ears. The parking lot faded, the colors draining away until there was only the echo of Eliza's voice and the roar of something older, deeper. Fire. Heat slammed into her memory with brutal force. Smoke choking her lungs. The shrill scream of a smoke alarm. A microwave sparking wildly, its door rattling as something inside burned far hotter than it should have. A doll. Pink plastic skin blistering. Synthetic hair curling in on itself. The sickly sweet smell of melted perfume filling the air. Rowan staggered, grabbing Theo's arm. Eliza, she whispered. Stop. But Eliza was shaking now, her face twisted with fury and something else. Fear, maybe. Or desperation. You were always jealous, Eliza continued, her words tumbling out. Always crying when they paid attention to me. You couldn't stand it. So you did it. I was 6, Rowan said faintly. So was I, Eliza shot back. And I remember you screaming. Rowan closed her eyes. She remembered screaming too. Not in anger. In terror. She remembered waking up to smoke. Remembered stumbling into the kitchen and seeing flames licking up the walls. Remembered Eliza standing frozen, clutching the doll to her chest, her face pale and blank. She remembered trying to pull Eliza toward the door. Remembered the ceiling collapsing. She had never spoken of it. Not to therapists. Not to anyone. She opened her eyes and looked at her sister. Eliza, she said softly. Do you remember putting the doll in the microwave? Eliza froze. The crowd had gone quiet. Even the traffic noise seemed to dim. I don't know what you're talking about, Eliza said, too quickly. You sprayed it with perfume, Rowan continued, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled. You said you wanted it to smell nice. You thought it would warm it up. Theo's grip tightened on Rowan's arm. Eliza shook her head violently. No. That's not your lying. You were jealous, Rowan said, tears burning her eyes now. But not of me. Of them. You wanted them to look at you. And when it went wrong, you ran. Eliza's breathing hitched. Her face crumpled, fury giving way to something raw and broken. They died, she whispered. They died and you just lived. Rowan's voice broke. So did you. For a moment, it looked like Eliza might collapse. Then her expression hardened, walls slamming back into place. This isn't over, she said again, the words worn thin by repetition. You'll pay for this. I'll make sure of it. She turned and fled, shoving past stunned onlookers, disappearing into the street. Rowan stood shaking, the weight of the past crushing down on her chest. Theo pulled her into a quiet embrace, shielding her from the stairs. It's okay, he murmured. I've got you. She clutched his shirt, sobs racking her body. I thought I'd imagined it. I thought, maybe I was wrong. You weren't, he said firmly. You're not. They didn't speak of it on the drive home. Rowan stared out the window, watching the city blur past, her reflection ghostly in the glass. That night, she dreamed of fire again. But this time, she remembered the end. A firefighter lifting her from the rubble. Cold air hitting her face. A voice saying, "You're safe now." She woke with tears on her cheeks and a strange sense of calm settling in her chest. The truth, once unearthed, burned. But it also cleared the air. And somewhere, deep inside, Rowan knew. The past had been set in motion again. And this time, it would not stay buried. The results were released on a humid afternoon, the kind that made the air feel heavy and expectant. Rowan saw her name first on a glowing screen in the school hallway. She didn't react right away. She stood there, staring at the ranked list as if it might rearrange itself if she looked too closely. Rank 1. National top scorer in science. Someone behind her gasped. Another voice whispered, "That's her." A hand clapped her on the shoulder. The hallway erupted into noise, congratulations bouncing off lockers and tiled floors. Rowan smiled. She thanked people. She nodded at teachers whose eyes shone with pride. Inside, she felt strangely quiet, like she was standing in the center of a storm she could finally see from above. Theo picked her up that evening. He didn't say anything until they were in the car and the doors were closed. Then he exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in all day. "You did it," he said. Rowan looked at him, really looked. His eyes were bright. Present. He was smiling, openly, without effort. "So did you," she replied. At home, Margaret hugged her. It was brief and awkward and meant everything. Victor shook her hand, his grip firm. "Well done." 2 words. Heavy with approval. They decided to celebrate. The dinner was scheduled for the following weekend. Nothing ostentatious, Margaret insisted. Just close acquaintances. A few colleagues from Victor's firm. Theo's therapist. Rowan's science teacher. And, at Rowan's quiet request, the Zhao family. Margaret raised an eyebrow but didn't object. "They are still her guardians," she said carefully. "It would be improper not to invite them." Rowan nodded, though her stomach churned. She told herself she wanted closure. The dining room glowed with warm light and polished wood. The table was laid with precision, every fork and glass exactly where it belonged. Rowan sat between Theo and Margaret, her back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple blue dress Margaret had chosen. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. The Zhao family arrived 10 minutes late. Mrs. Zhao swept in first, smiling broadly, her jewelry catching the light. Mr. Zhao followed, his expression stiff and unreadable. Eliza came last. Rowan barely recognized her. Eliza's face was pale, her eyes sunken. She wore a borrowed dress that hung awkwardly on her thin frame. She smiled too quickly, too often, like she was afraid the expression might crack if she let it rest. "Congratulations, Mrs. Zhao said, clasping Rowan's hands. "Such an achievement. We always knew Eliza's sister was clever too." Rowan stiffened but smiled politely. "Thank you." Eliza said nothing. Her gaze darted around the room, taking in the art, the furniture, the ease with which the harrows moved through the space. Her fingers twisted in the fabric of her dress. Dinner began smoothly enough. There was polite conversation. Compliments. Laughter at the appropriate moments. Rowan answered questions about her future plans, her interest in physics, her hopes for university. Eliza watched silently. Rowan felt it building, the way pressure gathers before something breaks. It happened when dessert was served. Eliza stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "Mrs. Zhao hissed, "Sit down." Eliza didn't. She walked around the table, her movements unsteady, and then, to everyone's shock, she dropped to her knees in front of Victor and Margaret. "I'm your daughter," she said, voice cracking. "I should have been yours from the beginning." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Rowan froze. "Please," Eliza continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Save me. I've been abused. I've suffered so much." Her finger jabbed toward Rowan, she knew. "She let me go. She stole my life." Margaret stood, her face pale. "Eliza, this is not 'I'll do anything,'" Eliza sobbed. "I'll study harder. I'll be obedient. I'll be grateful. Just don't send me back." The words landed like blows. Rowan's chest tightened. She remembered those same words, whispered into the dark years ago. Remembered believing them. "Mr. Zhao cleared his throat. "My apologies," he said smoothly, stepping forward. "My daughter has been under considerable stress. She's always been prone to dramatics when she doesn't get her way." Eliza turned on him. "That's not true." Mrs. Zhao sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. "She's been rebellious lately. Disrespectful. We've been very lenient, all things considered." Theo stood. "Lenient," he repeated, his voice low. Victor raised a hand. "Enough." The room stilled. He looked at Eliza, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "This is not the time or place for such accusations." Eliza's shoulders shook. "You don't understand." "I understand," Victor said. "That this is a private family matter. And that public scenes rarely serve the truth." Eliza laughed hysterically. "Of course you'd say that." She looked at Rowan, eyes blazing. "Aren't you going to tell them? Aren't you going to admit what you did?" Rowan stood slowly. Every eye turned to her. Her heart pounded, but her voice came out steady. "I won't lie," she said. "And I won't perform." Eliza's face twisted in disbelief. "I'm sorry you're unhappy," Rowan continued. "Truly. But I didn't steal anything from you. We both made choices." Eliza screamed, a raw, animal sound. "Mrs. Zhao grabbed her arm. "That's enough." Eliza collapsed, sobbing, her body folding in on itself. The staff rushed in. Guests looked away, embarrassed, shaken. Margaret moved to Rowan's side, placing a hand on her back. It was warm. Solid. "Take her home," Victor said to the Zhaos, his tone leaving no room for argument. They did. The door closed behind them, the echo loud in the sudden quiet. Rowan sank back into her chair, her legs trembling. She stared at the untouched dessert in front of her, the sweetness suddenly cloying. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Margaret shook her head. "You have nothing to apologize for." Theo squeezed her hand under the table. His grip was firm. Reassuring. That night, long after the guests had left, Rowan stood at her bedroom window, watching the lights of the city shimmer in the distance. She thought of Eliza being driven back to that house. Of the accusations dismissed. Of the truth twisted until it was unrecognizable. For the first time, Rowan understood something with painful clarity. Eliza did not want saving. She wanted replacement. And she would burn everything down if it meant standing where Rowan stood. The applause from earlier still rang in Rowan's ears. She realized then. Success did not end the story. It only gave the resentment a stage. University began with noise. Rowan had forgotten how loud freedom could be. The campus buzzed with overlapping conversations, rolling suitcases, laughter that spilled out of open dorm windows. Flyers layered every bulletin board, bright and chaotic, promising futures that hadn't yet learned how to disappoint. She stood in the middle of it all, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a campus map folded and refolded in her hand. Theo was beside her, taller now, broader in the shoulders. He wore the same neutral expression he always did in crowds, but his eyes were alert, tracking everything. He had been accepted into the same university, the same one she had aimed for in both lives. Different departments. Different buildings. Close enough. You're staring, he said. Rowan blinked. I'm trying to remember if I dreamed this once. He glanced at her, then back at the dorms. Did it end badly? She smiled faintly. No. This part was good. Her dorm room was small and imperfect and hers. Posters already lined the walls. Her roommate, Mina, was loud and curious and asked too many questions, which somehow felt comforting. They talked until midnight, swapping stories and snacks, the air thick with possibility. Rowan lay awake long after Mina fell asleep, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, heart light in a way it rarely had been. This time, she thought, I get to just be young. She threw herself into her studies with a joy that surprised even her. Physics labs ran long, the kind of long that made time disappear. She loved the smell of chalk dust, the low hum of equipment, the thrill of watching a hypothesis survive contact with reality. Her professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Halvorsen, invited her to join a research group before midterms. You see patterns, he told her, adjusting his glasses. That's rare. Theo, for his part, drifted toward her orbit without either of them naming it. He walked her back to her dorm when she studied late. He showed up with coffee when her eyes went glassy. He listened when she talked through problems out loud, even when he didn't understand the details. His emotional distance had softened over the years. He smiled more easily now. He frowned when she skipped meals. He learned how to worry. Rowan noticed. She didn't comment. Then Eliza came back into her life like a crack of thunder. It was a warm afternoon when Rowan spotted her across the quad, arm looped through a tall boy's elbow. Eliza looked transformed. Her hair was glossy, her clothes fashionable. Her smile was bright, confident. Victorious. The boy beside her had sharp features and an expensive watch. His gaze swept the campus with casual entitlement. Rowan stopped walking. Theo followed her line of sight and stiffened. You know them? Yes, Rowan said quietly. Unfortunately. Eliza saw them then. Her smile widened, and she tugged the boy toward them. Rowan, she called. What a coincidence. Rowan braced herself. Eliza. This is Julian, Eliza said, leaning into him. Julian Gu. Julian smiled, all teeth. I've heard so much about you. Rowan met his gaze and felt a chill crawl up her spine. I'm sure. Eliza laughed. Don't be like that. I wanted you to know. Julian helped me cut ties with the Zhaos. I'm free now. Free, Rowan thought. Or so you believe. That's good, Rowan said evenly. Congratulations. Eliza studied her, searching for envy. Finding none seemed to irritate her. And this must be your brother, Julian said, turning to Theo. His tone was pleasant, his eyes sharp. Interesting family. Theo didn't respond. Julian's smile thinned. Well, Eliza said brightly, we're in a hurry. Just wanted to say hello. She leaned in close to Rowan as they turned away, her voice dropping. This time, I win. Rowan watched them go, her chest tight. Theo exhaled slowly. He's trouble. Yes, Rowan agreed. And she thinks that's a feature. Julian Gu was impossible to ignore. His family name carried weight on campus. Donor buildings. Professors who smiled a little too widely. Students who orbited him, eager to bask in reflected importance. Eliza fit seamlessly into that world. She appeared at parties, at events, always on Julian's arm. Online, her post shifted tone. No more vague complaints. Now there were subtle digs, tragic captions, carefully curated vulnerability. Rowan ignored it. She focused on her work. On late nights in the lab. On laughter with Mina. On the quiet comfort of Theo's presence. But the shadows crept closer. One afternoon, Rowan was called into the department office. There's been a complaint, the administrator said, avoiding her eyes. Allegations of academic misconduct. Rowan's stomach dropped. What? Plagiarism. Misuse of lab resources. Rowan shook her head. That's not possible. We'll investigate, the administrator said stiffly. Outside, Rowan found Theo waiting. Julian, he said immediately. Yes. Theo's jaw tightened. He won't stop. Rowan stared at the campus buildings rising around them, solid and unyielding. He thinks power is something you take, she said. He doesn't understand that some things resist. She went home that night and worked harder than ever, documenting everything, preparing for a fight she had hoped never to face again. Elsewhere on campus, Eliza smiled into a camera, convinced she had finally stepped into the light. Rowan watched the stars from her dorm window and felt the familiar calm settle over her. She had seen this abyss before. And she knew exactly how it ended. The complaint went nowhere. Rowan sat across from the review panel, her spine straight, her hand steady on the folder she had prepared. Every experiment was logged. Every source cited. Every hour accounted for. Dr. Halvorsen spoke calmly but firmly on her behalf, his quiet authority filling the room. When it was over, the chair of the panel cleared his throat and said, "There is no basis for disciplinary action." Rowan nodded. "Thank you." She walked out into the corridor and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs for weeks. Theo was waiting, leaning against the wall. When he saw her, something in his shoulders loosened. "It's done," she said. He didn't smile. He pulled her into a brief, awkward hug instead. It lasted only a second, but Rowan felt it all the way down to her bones. Julian did not take the loss quietly. The attempts grew subtler, then sloppier. Rumors whispered through student groups. Anonymous posts questioning Rowan's integrity. A professor she had never met suddenly declined her application to an elective without explanation. None of it stuck. Rowan kept her head down and her work sharp. The Harrow name carried quiet weight, and Victor did not appreciate being tested. Lawyers made discreet inquiries. Doors closed that had once been ajar for Julian. Theo noticed everything. He had started dreaming again. He mentioned it one night as they walked back from the library, the campus nearly empty, lamplight pooling at their feet. "I keep seeing you," he said. "In places I've never been. Fires. Hospitals. Things that haven't happened." Rowan stopped walking. "Do you remember them as dreams?" she asked carefully, "or as memories?" Theo frowned. "I don't know." A chill ran through her. "You didn't before." "No," he admitted. "It's new." She searched his face, seeing something raw there. Fear. Concern. Something like recognition. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "If you ever feel like you're in danger, you tell me." She nodded. "I promise." Rowan's 20th birthday arrived on a clear autumn morning. She woke to messages flooding her phone. Congratulations from classmates. A short, precise note from Margaret waiting on her desk at home. A single line from Victor, "Dinner tonight. Don't be late." Mina had taped a banner above their door. There was cake in the common room. Laughter. Normalcy. It felt almost unreal. That afternoon, Rowan was in the lab when the news alert lit up every screen at once. Breaking news, GU group under federal investigation. Rowan stared at the headline, heart thudding. Another alert followed. And another. Charges ranging from financial fraud to human trafficking. Money laundering. Corruption. Names scrolling endlessly, a web unraveling in real time. Julian Gu's face appeared on screen, grainy footage of him being escorted out of a building, his expression stunned, furious, afraid. Rowan sank into a chair. "Dr. Halvorsen looked over her shoulder. "That explains a few things." Theo found her an hour later, his face pale. "It's everywhere," he said. "The whole family. It's massive." Rowan nodded slowly. She felt oddly detached, as if watching a physics demonstration she had predicted long ago. Eliza didn't call. She didn't post. Her social media went silent within hours. That evening, Victor called. "You're staying on campus tonight," he said without preamble. "Security is being increased." "Is Eliza?" Rowan began. Victor interrupted gently. "Not your responsibility." At dinner, though she wasn't there, the Harrow house buzzed with quiet activity. Phones rang. Meetings were scheduled. The machine of consequence moved efficiently. Julian was arrested 2 days later. Rowan saw the photo on her phone while sitting on the grass with Theo, leaves crunching beneath them. "He looks smaller," Theo said. He always was, Rowan replied. She thought of Eliza then. Of the way she had clung to Julian like a lifeline, convinced his shadow was safety. Rowan closed her eyes briefly. Power, she had learned, was often just another kind of costume. And when it burned away, there was nothing underneath. That night, Rowan stood alone on the dorm rooftop, the city spread out below her, lights flickering like distant stars. 20 years old. Alive. The giant had fallen. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her chest, that Eliza would not accept this ending quietly. People like her never did. Silence was never Eliza's ending. It was only the inhale. For 3 weeks after the Gu family collapsed, Eliza vanished. Her accounts went dark. Messages sent to her bounced back unanswered. Even the Zhao household, when discreetly contacted through intermediaries, claimed ignorance. Rowan almost allowed herself to believe Eliza had finally retreated somewhere quiet, licking her wounds, forced into reflection by the sheer scale of the disaster. She should have known better. The first video appeared at 2 in the morning. Rowan was half asleep, her laptop still open on her desk, equations blurred across the screen. Her phone buzzed once. Then again. Then it didn't stop. Mina groaned from her bed. Are you popular now or dying? Rowan frowned, reaching for her phone. Her name was trending. Not her full name at first. Just Rowan. Then variations. Then headlines written by people who had never met her, had never seen her life beyond a handful of carefully selected images. Orphan genius sister exposed the daughter they chose and the one they abandoned, a perfect victim or a perfect liar. Rowan's fingers went cold. She clicked the link at the top of the list. Eliza's face filled the screen. She was framed carefully, soft lighting, bare walls behind her. No jewelry. No makeup beyond a natural sheen. She wore a plain sweater, sleeves pulled over her hands like she was cold. Her eyes were red. Not swollen. Red enough to suggest tears without ruining the image. I didn't want to do this, Eliza said, voice trembling. But I can't stay silent anymore. Rowan stared, her pulse roaring in her ears. I've been asked why I disappeared, Eliza continued. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of powerful people. Scared of what would happen if I spoke. She inhaled shakily. My sister, she said, and paused just long enough for the word to sink in, has always been very good at taking what she wants. Rowan closed her eyes. Mina sat up slowly. Rowan? Rowan didn't answer. On the screen, Eliza wiped at her eyes. When we were children, our parents died in a tragic fire, she said. I've lived with that trauma my whole life. But what people don't know is that I was blamed for it. Quietly. Subtly. Over and over again. Rowan's stomach lurched. I was sent to an abusive household, Eliza went on. While my sister was taken in by a wealthy family. I was beaten. Controlled. Punished for every mistake. And she knew. Images appeared. Bruised arms. A cracked mirror. A diary page with shaky handwriting. Some of it was real. Some of it wasn't. Rowan could tell which was which. The internet couldn't. I tried to escape, Eliza said. I tried to build a life. But when I finally found someone who helped me, he was taken down. And suddenly I was alone again. Julian's name was never mentioned. He did terrible things, Eliza said carefully. I was a victim too. And now that he's gone, I'm being punished for surviving. The video ended with Eliza looking straight into the camera. I just want the truth, she whispered. Even if it destroys me. The comments flooded in faster than Rowan could read. How could anyone do that to their own sister? Money really does change people. She looked so cold in comparison. I always wondered how she got so successful so fast. Rowan dropped the phone onto her desk like it had burned her. Mina stared at the screen, then at Rowan. That's not true. Right? Rowan opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her chest felt tight, compressed, like the air had been sucked out of the room. By morning, the story had metastasized. Clipped segments of Eliza's video circulated without context. Commentary channels dissected Rowan's facial expressions in old interviews. Armchair psychologists diagnosed her as a narcissist. Anonymous sources claimed she had manipulated the heroes into choosing her. Someone dug up the fire report from years ago and highlighted every ambiguity in the language. Parent killer trended by noon. Rowan didn't go to class. She sat on her dorm bed, laptop open, watching her life distort in real time. Every achievement reframed as theft. Every silence interpreted as guilt. Her inbox filled with messages from strangers demanding explanations she didn't owe and couldn't give. Dr. Halvorsen called. Don't respond, he said firmly. Not yet. Theo showed up an hour later, eyes dark, jaw tight. I'm staying, he said. However long this takes. She nodded, unable to speak. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was how close they brushed the truth without ever touching it. Eliza spoke about abuse. That part was real. She spoke about fear. That too. She spoke about being overlooked, overshadowed, desperate to be chosen. What she didn't speak about was responsibility. She didn't speak about the doll. Or the microwave. Or the way she had run while Rowan screamed. And the internet didn't ask. They crowned Eliza something better than a liar. They crowned her a survivor. Within days, Eliza reappeared publicly, stepping carefully into the role she had written for herself. She posted regularly now. Soft-spoken videos. Long captions about healing. About reclaiming her voice. Donations poured in. Brands reached out. She declined them publicly, citing her fragile mental state. It made her look noble. Rowan became the villain in the background of Eliza's story. The faceless, privileged antagonist who never spoke because villains never had anything worth hearing. Theo watched it all with a fury that frightened Rowan. They're eating it up, he said one night, pacing her dorm room. Every lie. Every implication. She knows how to tell a story, Rowan murmured. Theo stopped. This isn't just a story. No, Rowan agreed. It's a weapon. The Harrows moved quietly. Lawyers reviewed statements. Screenshots were archived. Timelines reconstructed. Victor advised patience. Margaret checked in daily, her voice calm, grounding. We know who you are, Margaret said. So do the people who matter. It didn't stop the stares on campus. Or the whispers. Or the anonymous messages slipped under Rowan's door, some cruel, some begging for confession. One night, Rowan sat alone in the lab long after everyone else had left. The building hummed softly around her, machines steady and indifferent. She pulled up Eliza's first video again. She watched it slowly this time. Not as a sister. Not as a target. As an observer. She noticed the pauses. The rehearsed tremor in Eliza's voice. The way the narrative curved carefully around certain dates. Certain facts. Eliza wasn't trying to destroy Rowan completely. She was trying to replace her. To step into the role of the brilliant orphan. The wrong daughter. The one the world rallied behind. Rowan closed the laptop. She understood now. Eliza didn't want justice. She wanted the spotlight to finally love her back. Theo found Rowan there an hour later, sitting in the dark, hands folded in her lap. They'll turn, he said quietly. They always do. Rowan looked up at him. Only if the truth is louder, she said. He met her gaze. Then we'll make it louder. Outside, the campus slept, unaware of the storm still building. And somewhere else, Eliza smiled into her camera, convinced she had finally won. She had no idea how fragile her story really was. Or how sharp the truth could be when it decided to speak. The turning point did not come with a scream. It came with a statement. Rowan posted nothing at first. While the internet fed itself on outrage, she stayed silent, exactly as Victor's lawyers advised and exactly as Eliza had expected. Silence made a better villain. It gave people room to project whatever shape of monster they needed. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, the Harrow Foundation released a single-page press statement. It was not emotional. It was not defensive. It was factual. It clarified timelines. Adoption records. School placements. Guardianship laws. It confirmed that Rowan had never had legal authority over Eliza's placement, had never been consulted, had never been in a position to choose anything. It stated, plainly, that any claims to the contrary were demonstrably false. At the bottom was a final line. Further defamatory statements will be pursued through all appropriate legal channels. The reaction was immediate. Not explosive. Not viral in the way Eliza's video had been. But steady. Journalists began to ask different questions. Legal analysts pointed out inconsistencies in Eliza's narrative. Commentators who had rushed to judgment quietly deleted earlier posts. Dr. Halvorsen went next. He stood at a podium during a scheduled academic conference, his topic listed as advances in quantum materials. Halfway through his opening remarks, he paused. "I would like to address something unrelated," he said. The room stilled. He spoke about Rowan's work. About her integrity. About the hours she spent in the lab, the mistakes she owned, the credit she shared. He stated clearly that he would stake his professional reputation on her character. A man with nothing to gain and everything to lose. The clip spread faster than Eliza's tears ever had. Then the leaks began. Not from the heroes. From people who had known Eliza. Former classmates shared stories. Not cruel. Just honest. Screenshots surfaced of messages Eliza had sent over the years. Demands. Manipulations. Sudden shifts from affection to accusation when things didn't go her way. A former Zhao family tutor spoke anonymously, describing patterns of conflict that followed Eliza wherever she went. None of it painted her as evil. But it painted her as unreliable. The internet, fickle as it was, adjusted its stance. What if both sisters were victims? Why does Eliza's story keep changing? Why didn't she mention the fire investigation details? Rowan finally spoke 3 days later. Her post was brief. She did not name Eliza. She did not defend herself line by line. She wrote about grief. About how trauma warps memory. About how surviving the same event did not mean experiencing it the same way. She stated that she wished her sister's safety and healing, and that she would not be engaging further. No emojis. No hashtags. Just restraint. It infuriated some people. It reassured many more. The final shift came quietly, almost buried beneath the noise. Dr. Halvorsen's team published their findings. Rowan was listed as a key contributor. The research detailed a breakthrough in material behavior under extreme conditions, with applications that made headlines on their own merit. Defense. Energy. Infrastructure. Suddenly, Rowan was no longer just a person in a scandal. She was a scientist. Public opinion tilted, then slid. People didn't apologize so much as move on, embarrassed by how eagerly they'd sharpened their knives. Eliza's following shrank. Her comments turned cautious. Then critical. Then silent. One morning, her account was gone. Deleted. Rowan found out while sitting in the lab, sunlight spilling across her notes. Mina looked up from her phone. She disappeared. Rowan nodded. She had felt it coming, like pressure easing before a storm broke. Theo exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something he'd been holding in his chest for years. "It's over," he said. Rowan didn't answer right away. She thought of Eliza alone somewhere, her carefully constructed identity collapsing. She thought of how much of herself Eliza had poured into the lie, how empty it would feel without it. "It's quiet," Rowan said finally. That night, she walked home alone, the city humming around her. The stairs were gone. The whispers faded into the background noise of ordinary life. She paused on a bridge, watching the river move steadily beneath her. Truth, she had learned, did not shout. It waited. And when it finally spoke, it didn't need an audience. Only time. Rowan turned and walked on, the weight on her chest lighter than it had been in years. She didn't know what Eliza would do next. But for the first time, she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came, she would not be dragged back into the fire. Rowan started dreaming about the accident weeks before it happened. Not the fire. Not the smoke or the screams or the way heat had once swallowed the world whole. This was different. Quieter. Always the same image. A road at dusk. Headlights flaring too bright, too fast. The sound of tires screaming in protest. A sense of inevitability so heavy it pressed the air from her lungs. She would wake with her heart racing, fingers clenched in her sheets, the echo of impact vibrating through her bones. Theo noticed. "You're not sleeping," he said one morning, handing her coffee she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. I'm fine, Rowan replied automatically. He didn't let it go. You say that every time you're not. She met his gaze, searching for the right version of the truth. I feel like something is circling, she said finally. Like the past is trying to correct itself. Theo's jaw tightened. He had been dreaming too. He hadn't told her everything, but she could see it in his eyes. The way he scanned streets. The way his body angled slightly in front of hers without conscious thought. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. Rowan smiled, soft and sad. I know. The anniversary came quietly. No headlines. No reminders. Just a date Rowan had memorized in her bones. The day she had died in her first life. The day the universe had decided she was finished. She didn't tell anyone what the date meant. She went about her day as usual. Classes. Lab work. A late meeting with Dr. Halvorsen. She told herself she was being foolish. Superstition had no place in physics. Patterns didn't mean intent. Still, when she left the building that evening, the sky already darkening, unease crept up her spine. Theo was waiting at the gate. You didn't answer your phone, he said. I lost track of time. He didn't look convinced. I'll walk you. The street was nearly empty. Streetlights buzzed softly overhead. Rowan's breath fogged faintly in the cooling air. Halfway across the intersection, she felt it. That pressure again. That sense of being seen. She turned. Headlights flared. Too close. Too fast. For a split second, she saw the driver's face through the windshield. Eliza. Her eyes were wild. Her mouth twisted into something between a smile and a scream. There was no hesitation in her grip on the wheel. It was deliberate. Theo reacted before Rowan's mind could catch up. He shoved her sideways with all his strength. Rowan hit the pavement hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She heard the sickening thud of metal hitting flesh, the shatter of glass, the shriek of brakes far too late. Someone screamed. Rowan scrambled up, pain flaring through her shoulder, and saw Theo sprawled on the asphalt a few feet away. Theo, she choked. He was conscious. Blood ran from a gash on his forehead, but his eyes were open, fixed on her. You're safe, he said hoarsely. Sirens wailed in the distance. Eliza's car sat skewed against a streetlight, the front end crumpled. Smoke hissed from beneath the hood. The driver's door hung open. Eliza staggered out, laughing and crying at the same time. I remembered, she babbled. I remembered this time. You don't get to take it from me again. Police arrived within minutes. Eliza didn't resist when they restrained her. She kept staring at Rowan as they led her away, her expression finally collapsing into something empty. Theo survived. A concussion. Broken ribs. Weeks of recovery. But he survived. Rowan barely left his side in the hospital, sleeping in a chair, counting his breaths until her own slowed. Margaret came. Victor came. They spoke softly, fiercely, to doctors and lawyers and police officers. The case was airtight. Attempted murder. Psychological evaluations. A history that finally caught up with Eliza instead of being rewritten. Rowan visited Eliza once. The room was small and bare. Eliza looked older, stripped of performance, stripped of an audience. Her hands shook where they rested on the table. Do you remember, Rowan asked quietly, the doll? Eliza laughed weakly. You always loved that stupid thing. You sprayed it with perfume, Rowan said. You put it in the microwave. Eliza's breath hitched. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know it would explode. I know, Rowan said. Silence stretched between them. I ran, Eliza said, her voice breaking. I left you there. Rowan nodded. I know that too. For the first time, Eliza didn't argue. She folded in on herself, sobbing, the weight of what she had buried finally crushing her. Rowan stood. This is goodbye, she said. Eliza didn't look up. Spring came. Theo healed slowly, stubbornly, refusing help until Rowan scolded him for it. He laughed more now. Spoke more easily. Something in him had finally settled, as if saving her had anchored him fully in this life. One evening, as they sat on the steps outside the lab, watching the sun dip below the skyline, Theo reached for her hand. I think, he said, searching for the words, that I was meant to be here with you. Not just as your brother. Rowan's chest warmed. I think, she replied, I've known that for a long time. She didn't dream of the road anymore. The future stretched open, uncertain and bright. Physics. Discovery. A family that chose her and stayed. A love built not on fate, but on presence. Rowan had died once. She had lived twice. And this time, she intended to stay.